Everyone remembers the first time they truly fail in public. My own memory is sliced into moments. My trembling knees on the lacquered hardwood, the stares of the panelists above my portfolio, the slide of sweat down my spine. Most of all, I remember the silence after the collapse, the hush when laughter is still deciding if it should emerge, the edge before cruelty, when everyone waits for you to recover. The auditorium at the Otis College of Art and Design was cold and bright that morning, sunlight cutting through the high windows and lighting up the specks of dust floating above the jury table. Outside, palm branches rattled in an off-season wind. Spring in Los Angeles is a contradiction, everything blooming but a chill that starts in the bones. I stood at the front of the room, pinning my sketch to the easel. My hands shook. Beside me, swatches of fabric fluttered like nervous birds. I caught my own reflection in the glass, thin, pale, dark hair pinned up in a hasty knot, eyes shadowed from too many sleepless nights. My sketch, a loose, kinetic swirl of a cobalt blue dress, gleamed on the crisp page. I drew a breath, turned to the jury and tried to begin. What poured out wasn't the vision I'd struggled to form, the narrative of the ocean and sky, of belonging and movement. Instead, I heard my own voice crack, stumble, repeat itself, words tangled, my mind emptied. I looked at the three jury members, a bleach-blonde woman with thin glasses and tight lips, a suited man with a gaze like polished steel. A younger faculty member too distracted to feign attention. In the back row, I caught the worst sight of all, my mother, arms crossed, lips pursed, looking down at her phone. My uncle, overweight with a Dodgers cap, scratching his beard, already bored. I imagined then more than saw the collective judgment. Why is she even doing this? Who does she think she is? My knees buckled. I tried to hold the silence with dignity, but desperation painted my face. Finally, I stepped back from the easel. Sorry, I mumbled. Can I start over? The jury didn't answer. It felt like another minute passed before the steel-eyed man said, "Please do." His voice was not unkind, but neither did it hide his impatience. I tried again, but nothing found its shape. My ideas collapsed. My throat closed up. Afterward, as I gathered my scattered sketches and ragged dignity, I heard someone in the back stifle a chuckle. My mother didn't say a word until we were in the car. Inside her beige Prius, silence tightened around us. She stared straight ahead at the traffic on Lincoln Boulevard. I waited for comfort or scolding or anything, but she let the silence do the work. Finally, maybe this is a sign, Eva. I stared at the traffic, numb. What do you mean? She shrugged, glancing at me sidelong. Not everyone's meant to be an artist. You could come back home, take classes at Glendale or even CSUN. Something normal. At home that evening, after my uncle had told me I at least made it entertaining for the audience, my cousin Sam had messaged, "Lol, you okay?" And my mother had retreated to the laundry room to make some calls. I locked myself in my old bedroom. My phone buzzed with platitudes from classmates. "Don't worry, they're so mean," or "You'll do better next time." But no one really understood what it means to unravel. I sat on the end of the bed, surrounded by old posters, high school trophies, reminders of small, easy victories. The truth was, I'd never believed them when they'd said I was talented. I'd always half expected to get found out. Long after midnight, I lay beneath stiff sheets, eyes burning, staring at the spider crack in the ceiling. Downstairs, my mother's feet creaked on the kitchen floor. That's the core of shame, how it melts resolve, how it echoes. It makes your ambitions sound like delusions. The room smelled faintly of detergent and dust. I left in the morning, muttering excuses. My mother watched me go, not cold but already resigned. In the months that followed, anything containing fashion became poison in conversation. Nobody said the word, but I could feel it in every interaction, the polite curiosity, the shifting glances when I lingered in the living room, sketching on napkins or obsessing over lines in my battered copy of Vogue. I took a job in a cafe, then at a clothing retailer in Pasadena, folding endless piles of cheap knits and pretending not to notice the eyes of old high school friends who wandered in. "Eva, you're still doing the art thing?" asked my cousin at a birthday dinner, voice raised as if talking to a child. I nodded, mouthful of cake, and kept my face smooth. My mother never looked prouder than when I admitted I'd applied for a job in finance. Her friend's husband needed an assistant and was waiting to hear back, but beneath the surface, a small thing survived. Some nights I sketched until dawn, catching the city in smears of lead and ink. Inspiration came in odd places, a woman on the metro in a patchwork trench, the silvery curve of morning light on a freeway sign. The way my leftover coffee creased the napkin into an accidental pattern. Each private victory was invisible, silent, mine alone. Then, a call came, an email actually softly worded with a subject line that made my heart stutter. An internship interview 6 months after my collapse with a minor but up-and-coming boutique in the Arts District. They'd seen a stray post online, a photo of one of my sketches, uploaded late at night with no caption, and liked something about my lines. "We can't pay much, but we love your sense of movement," the email said. "Would you meet for coffee?" I didn't tell my family. I borrowed my mother's car, invented a babysitting gig, and drove to the interview with my portfolio clutched like a shield. The owner, Mari, was sharp-eyed and warm, her tiny studio crammed with fabric-trailing vines and the scent of jasmine tea. She asked real questions and listened when I spoke. "You feel things deeply," she said, flipping through my sketches. "Let's translate that." She offered me 2 days a week, a badge and a battered rolling stool. The work was small and relentless, hemming, shaping, steaming, listening to Mari talk to clients, observing fittings where fabric transformed bodies and moods. I learned that failure in the right space is feedback, not humiliation. I learned how to make myself invisible when it mattered and bold when the moment called for it. I started drawing again. On weekends, I studied in thrift stores, unpicking seams to reverse engineer construction. I wore my own awkward prototypes, enduring raised eyebrows and the subtle mockery of the women in my mother's circle. Still, every design decision sharpened the voice in my head. "You aren't real, nobody wants this." It took time, work, and a dozen minor triumphs to make the voice quieter. My mother asked only once, "Why are you always downtown?" I smiled and shrugged, and she didn't push. Maybe she had learned to expect less from me. Maybe she'd given up. Sometimes surrender is the only privacy left. Years slipped away. Mari's business grew, and with it, my confidence. The studio's walls filled with new names, new laughter, new chaos. I became her right hand in the design room, trusted to interpret the sketches of visiting artists. My first solo collection, a capsule line of evening wear with oceanic folds, debuted at the gallery next door. People marveled, they asked questions. I found myself teaching students what little I had earned. A magazine editor, young, mercurial, hungry, spotted me at a tasting event and asked if I had ever thought of working alone. "There's funding now," she whispered, sliding her card into my palm. "Everyone's looking for a new voice. LA can be cruel, but it does love a comeback." I remembered then that silence from the first jury. My knees didn't buckle, instead my resolve hardened. I took a month to decide. I walked the city from the aggressive waves of Venice Beach to the rough concrete of Silver Lake until decisions grew inside me, slow and unyielding as weeds. I said yes, just yes, not a scream, not a song, quietly, privately. Over the next year I built something strange and beautiful, a collection that made sense only to me at first. Structured sunset colors, shifting blues, iridescent panels like city glass at dawn. The models were friends, the fittings held in borrowed spaces. A tiny crowdfunding campaign, met mostly by old classmates and young artists, paid for the samples. No one knew except Mari. My mother didn't ask. My name grew in small ways, whispered in the right stairwells, scribbled on inspiration boards. People started calling me the risk, always half a compliment, half a warning. The first time a department store buyer called, I thought she was a telemarketer. But my clothes began to make their way into people's lives, first as curiosities, then as statements, then as regular, taken-for-granted parts of the LA night. Sometimes I drove back to Glendale past the old house, watching the red-tiled roofs slip by. I bought groceries at the Ralph's where I'd worked summers in high school. I left bags at my mother's porch, rang the bell, and ran away before she opened the door. Something about success made me shy. When LA Fashion Week announced its Emerging Designers Showcase, I let the email sit in my inbox for 2 days. In the end, it was Mari, now more friend than mentor, who made me answer it. I designed 12 looks, each one a piece of the city, traffic-glazed silver, the blush of sunset over the 101, a whisper of jacaranda. I worked through the night, hands raw, music loud. At every setback, I remembered that silence from years before, how shame had frozen me. I let resolve carry me through. The night before the show, I sat on a folding chair backstage staring at my hands. Mari squeezed my shoulder. "You did this," she said, "remember." I nodded. My mother had promised, absently, to come if she could. My uncle likely wouldn't. I didn't expect more than skepticism from anyone in my family. Lowe's angels shimmered outside the old theater. Strings of lights trembled over the crowded street, people flocking to see what was next, what was possible. The showcase was a blur of color and light. Models walked the runway, my runway in garments that seemed impossibly alive under the spotlights. Camera flashes popped like fireworks. Reviewers scribbled furiously, stylists murmured. I stood in the wings, heart pounding as each look returned, as models slipped out and back in, my name an echo in the air. When the final look, a cobalt blue dress like the one from my recital, only complete and magnificent, emerged, the applause was different. Louder certain, a journalist leaned into me, voice reverent. "Who are you wearing?" The model smiled, shy, nervous, radiant, and pointed at me. I stepped into the lights, unsteady, squinting at the crowd. For a heartbeat, I saw my mother seated between two strangers. She looked older, worried and proud, her eyes shining. My uncle was there, arms folded, mouth open, as if caught in some private astonishment. My cousin, phone in hand, frozen between embarrassment and awe. But what I remember most is the hush, 1,000 people, silent not in judgment but in respect, the first kind silence, the kind you earn. The jury from years before, at least two of them, were in the row behind my family. I recognized the steel-eyed man, his hair now silver, his gaze softening. He met my eye, nodded once, not as judge but as peer. I raised my head steady, my knees did not shake. In that silence I forgave myself the old collapse, I became for once enough. After the show, everything blurred. The press, the well-wishers, contracts pressed into my palm. Friends both old and new colliding in mutual disbelief. My phone binged with messages, strangers, buyers, family. It was my uncle, oddly enough, who found me alone at the edge of the after-party, cradling a glass of Prosecco, watching the lights turn the street golden. He shuffled up, cap in hand, stomach looming just ahead of him. "Hey kid," he grunted. I looked up, bracing for the joke. He cleared his throat. "I seen that dress, that's something Eva, didn't know you had it in you," his voice faltered. "Proud of you, think your grandma would've, well, just proud, right?" He smiled, awkward, and shuffled away before I could answer. When my mother reached me carefully, hands smoothing her skirt, her eyes were wet. "Eva," she said, voice trembling. I didn't know it was like this, I didn't know you could make this." I laughed, not unkind. "Neither did I said. We stood together, silent. Around us the city thundered, but inside peace began, small but certain. Later that week, after the noise and the coverage, I went home to Glendale. My childhood room felt different, smaller, less haunted. My sketches were there, old trophies faded beneath sun-bleached curtains. My mother left the door open while she cooked downstairs. The scent of cumin and onions drifted up, familiar, comforting. I sat on the bed, opened a sketchbook and began again. Somewhere downstairs, my uncle told a neighbor about the show, exaggerating my bravery, turning failure into family legend. This is what redemption feels like, not triumph but return. Not victory over others but peace with yourself. The silence now is easy. It contains everything I became and all I might still become. In that silence I sketch the future. The lines are bolder than before.